This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
Tornadoes can occur in any state in the country and at any time of the year. But when you aren't used to an outbreak of severe weather, it can come as a surprise.
Take, for instance, Virginia. Between 1991 and 2015, the state experienced an average of 17 twisters a year. But on August 6, 1993, all of those tornadoes and more occurred in one afternoon.
It was Friday, August 6, 1993. Tornadoes tore through Petersburg, Colonial Heights, and Hopewell. It was violent weather in Virginia. From WTVR-TV,
just sound like a train coming through the building. And when I stood up, I looked out on the third floor, and you could see the roof just peeling off.
The truck picked up off the ground, and all of a sudden it dropped back down, and it was that quick.
Meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service and State College, Barbara Watson.
From seeing 4 tiny pixels on the radar to within 10 minutes having a full-blown storm with a tornado dropping down out of it and heading into Petersburg. And that's just almost unheard of.
Former Petersburg police detective Greg Seidel.
There were people stumbling out of buildings that had collapsed, covered with dust and disoriented. Many first responders were coming into the scene.
And Virginia State Senator Rosalyn Dance, then mayor of Petersburg, Virginia.
The amazing thing is that in the worst of times, you see the best of people. And they did come from not only around the state, but so many people reached out to us from other states to try to help us get through that terrible, terrible time in the history of Petersburg.
This is Tornado Talk, the story of severe storms and survival when 23 twisters tore through parts of Virginia, killing 4, injuring more than 200, and doing in excess of $50 million in damage.
Forecasters became concerned the morning of August 6, 1993, when it appeared that an unusual severe weather scenario would unfold across east central Virginia. National Weather Service meteorologist Barbara Watson remembers it well.
So this was a very unusual day. And you know, definitely the office in Sterling, Virginia, which helps cover a lot of the state forecasts for a lot of the state of Virginia back then, was looking at it, and there were some firsts that happened that day, and one of them was that one of the forecasters who was working and looking at all the ingredients that were coming together put out a special weather statement that was a severe weather outlook that actually called for, specifically saying that there was going to be a tornado outbreak across southeast Virginia. And that was just something that we had never done before. But he was so confident that all these ingredients were coming together that something big was going to happen that day. And so he put this statement out. And it was in conjunction with the Storm Prediction Center out in Oklahoma was also, gearing up for a potential event.
As officials spread the word that severe weather and tornadoes were possible, residents in the Commonwealth might not have been that worried. Up until that time, the deadliest tornado outbreak occurred back in May of 1929. That's when 5 tornadoes killed 21 people.
It wouldn't be the first time that Petersburg had been hit, though. On June 21st, 1970, a twister of F2 strength had hit the community, and again on May 8th, 1984. That's when a tornado caused F3 damage. Both of those storms spawned tornadoes but caused no injuries and no deaths. August 6th, 1993 would be different.
Technology was not what it is today. Barbara Watson at the National Weather Service says radar coverage was sparse, and forecasters were still training on Doppler radar.
At that time, we didn't even have, now there's a Doppler radar in Wakefield, Virginia, and that radar didn't exist back then. We didn't have Doppler radar yet, except they just put one in Sterling, Virginia, and we hadn't even gone through a full year on it. We were all just completing our initial training on the radar, but still it was like 100 miles away from Petersburg, or 80 miles away, and so it was, by the time the radar beam gets down to that area, it's very high up into the storm. And so you were relying on some of the older style radars, which weren't exceptionally close. The best one was in Patuxent River, which is still a ways away over in Maryland. And then there was a smaller radar there in Lynchburg, Virginia. And forecasters, trying to look at these radars and determine what was going on. So it was very difficult for them to initially detect the development.
The first touchdown happened early that Friday afternoon. It occurred near the town of Kenbridge at 12:43. Roofs were ripped off of a furniture company and a briquette plant. The tornado then moved into Nottoway County. Meteorologist Barbara Watson recalls how unusually rare that day was.
We call the storms that produce these tornadoes supercells. They're huge storms, and it's not a typical thing in Virginia. But sure enough, by 1 o'clock that day, we had two supercells that moved up towards Richmond and Petersburg. And another really rare thing that happened with a Petersburg tornado is that typically these storms, they're big rotating thunderstorms. In the development of a thunderstorm, to get to the point of dropping one of these type tornadoes would typically maybe take it about 45 minutes to develop. And so there was one of these storms that was moving up to the west and did actually produce a weak F1 type tornado, which had winds maybe up to 100 miles an hour in it. And this new storm cell started to develop to the southeast of that storm. And the cool air outflow from the rain area of the storm, of the big one that was to the west northwest of this other storm cell that was just beginning to pop up, was able to sweep in and help this new storm cell develop extremely rapidly, so that from our vantage point all the way up in Sterling, Virginia, we went from seeing 4 tiny pixels on the radar to within 10 minutes having a full-blown storm with a tornado dropping down out of it and heading into Petersburg. And that's just almost unheard of.
By 1:30 in the afternoon, a supercell had exploded in intensity, now spawning a tornado, heading into the community of Petersburg, Virginia. Petersburg was known for its Old Town area that withstood the Civil War back in the 1860s. Most of the buildings still stood from that era until the tornado continued on its path.
A large multi-vortex tornado was on the ground, tearing into the commercial historic district of Petersburg. Then Petersburg police detective Greg Seidel said he didn't know it was coming and recalls it ending as quickly as it began.
I know that a mile and a half away from the river, I had a point of elevation, and driving that way, I could see nothing. It wasn't like the sky was dark, or it was. It's like it just dropped out of the sky and disappeared as soon as it came through.
Seidel said officers were initially called to assist with a gas explosion, but the loud noise was actually a tornado that had descended on Petersburg.
The tornado, when it touched down, it was without warning. So the detectives that were inside a building that was also heavily damaged believed that it was a natural gas explosion from one of the adjacent buildings or the utility itself. That's what it sounded like to them. It was such a instant, quick, and devastating, powerful event that they had no idea that it was a tornado.
The oldest standing train station in Virginia had been demolished. 58 buildings were badly damaged or destroyed. The end unit of a row of brick buildings was completely wiped out, so all that remained were a few side walls. 38 people were inside some of those buildings. Greg Seidel said he and officers immediately moved into search and rescue mode.
So I rolled to downtown, and as I went down the main street, Sycamore Street, I could see that the power lines were swaying, debris was falling. The tornado had just passed, and as soon as I got to the epicenter of the tornado damage, there were people stumbling out of buildings that had collapsed, covered with dust and disoriented. Many first responders were coming into the scene, so we started to enter the buildings that looked the most damaged. One in particular was the French Betsy restaurant, and inside we found folks who were able to walk out with help, and some that were partially buried in the debris. So we worked to extract them from the fallen masonry. It was all brick. Get them to stretchers and take them to a triage center that was set up in a nearby parking lot. After the first individuals were located and gotten to safety, we then started checking the rest of the buildings, which was precarious because they were in a state of, it's hard to explain. Part of the building would be fine, and another part of the building would be completely destroyed and very precarious to try to travel through, especially on the upper floors.
Rosalyn Dance had just become the mayor of Petersburg, Virginia, a year before the tornado struck. Today, she's a state senator of the 16th District. She recalls making her way into town after the storm had hit.
Actually, I was en route to City Hall and noticed a downpouring of rain, but really wondered what was happening. And as I tried to get to City Hall, I saw that the streets were closed off, and and I said, okay, I'll take the next street and the next street, but it was very difficult just to get there, and I knew something major must have happened. And by the time I arrived, the question to me was, where is the city manager? And it's like, why are you asking? Well, they said, where the Art League in Old Town, the building is gone, and they said you all were together, and we don't know where the city manager is. And that's when they informed me that the tornado had set down into our historic area of the city, and one that we had been touting that we were on the verge of an economic renaissance, because we had flourishing businesses operating in these historic business buildings on the first floor, with the small business owners living upstairs. Normally the second or the third level was home. So in a matter of seconds, we now had people that were without homes, they were homeless, and they'd lost their jobs and means of livelihood. So the devastation was overwhelming for a new mayor, and quite frankly, the city manager had recently been hired as well. So we were very, very new at our jobs, and now we had this major catastrophic event, and it's where do we go from here? And trying to put reasoning to what seemed to be a nightmarish situation and keeping our community calm.
Barbara Watson at the National Weather Service says that because of the rarity of an outbreak in Virginia and the lack of decent radar coverage, they used a unique method to issue tornado warnings that day.
We quickly realized that any of these supercells that develop were going to produce a tornado. And we had a new lightning detection system at the office. And it's amazing for me in this time to even think back of doing this, because we work so differently now. But we realized that these storms were producing these clusters of lightning strikes, and so anytime you had a supercell developing and you began seeing these clusters of lightning strikes, we were pushing warnings out the door, tornado warnings for the storms, and we just don't do business like that anymore. It was such a rare day, though, that we were successful in doing this. Now we use the Doppler radar, and we're looking at the velocities and all this detail within the storm, but we didn't have that back then.
From the Old Town area of Petersburg, where F4 damage had occurred, the twister moved on to the historic neighborhood of Pocahontas Island.
47 of the 57 homes on the island were hit hard. A 200-year-old church was destroyed, but a Bible that laid open on a podium was untouched. 40 people were hurt, but no one was killed. Damage would be rated as F3. The tornado then headed for Colonial Heights. Senator Rosalyn Dance says the memories are still fresh in her mind.
It was not just Petersburg that was impacted. That was the neighboring city of Colonial Heights, where the Walmart store was, and there were actually people that died there. But the amazing thing was all the destruction that happened in the Old Town area, no one died in the city of Petersburg. The devastation was such that Petersburg has a unique island known as Pocahontas Island, which was the place where blacks and whites lived together even before the blacks were freed, if you will. But on this island, they lived as freed men and women living together. And the history of that island was now one that was besieged by the results of the tornado as well. And so we had the concern of the city and the concern of this particular island.
Then Petersburg detective Greg Seidel would eventually become police chief. Today, he's retired from law enforcement. He remembers the tornado tracking toward Colonial Heights.
Tornado quickly went across the Appomattox into Colonial Heights, and the most severely damaged structure over there was the brand new Walmart, which had many customers inside. The roof collapsed. There were fatalities. And so local response was quick there, but it was overwhelming. We had, fortunately, not as many injuries or fatalities as were possible or likely, but it still was a very busy 3 or 4 hours ensuring that all the buildings were clear and that all the wounded were being treated.
It was kind of like going into shock because it would seem so unreal. You're at Walmart shopping for school supplies, and all of a sudden the ceiling caves in on you.
In Colonial Heights, the tornado was reportedly as wide as the entire Walmart store. That's where most of the deaths occurred. 3 people were killed at the front of the store, and 198 others were injured. 500 cars in the parking lot were damaged, with many of them losing windows. Others were flipped and tossed like toys.
It was 1:40 in the afternoon. The tornado was still on the ground and doing damage. From the Walmart, it crossed the Appomattox River again, entering Prince George County. It struck Tarmac, Virginia Incorporated, a sand and gravel company. The second floor of the cinder block building collapsed, and that's where a 28-year-old man was crushed and killed. Damage would be rated F2.
The twister would then cross Interstate 295 and aim for another town, Hopewell. It tore through the northern part of the community, damaging an apartment complex. 8 people were hurt.
The tornado finally weakened as it crossed Route 10 and moved out over the Appomattox and James Rivers. But that would not be the end.
At least 16 more tornadoes would touch down near Chesterfield, Charles City, New Kent, Southampton, Sussex, Surrey, James City, Isle of Wight, Newport News, Middlesex, Northampton, Suffolk, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach.
Then Petersburg Mayor Rosalyn Dance, now Virginia State Senator, said many people who lost their homes wanted to recover belongings in the hardest hit town. She and city officials were concerned for their safety.
It was one of the amazing things that seemed everybody got out. The concern was for the business people that wanted to get back to their business and their homes, and to be able to have to firmly say to them, it is not safe. I found out more about, as a mayor, that there's a police, but I found out the importance of the fire, that the first responders was really the chief of the fire chief, who had to go in and make sure that there were no gas leaks that could cause explosions in the area, and all the various things that had to be checked out for safety. And the stableness of the buildings, where those who wanted, I just need to go see my business, I just need to go check my home, to tell them that they could not come back to those places that represented, again, their home. I'm now homeless, and I no longer have a job. And you're saying that I cannot come into that area. That was really a hard task to keep people. They were angry, but are dealing with that. So a lot of our time was spent in trying to have informative town hall meetings to address the issues and keep people informed of what was going to be done to help them on the federal level, the state level, and what we as a locality could do, and make the commitment that we would hang with them, that we would not just go away until we had made our city whole.
Meteorologist Barbara Watson said she was part of the storm survey team that would track the storm's path and review the damage it caused.
So the storm was rated an F4 at the time, which estimates the winds well up over 150 miles an hour, upwards to 200 mile an hour type winds. And one of the reasons that it got this sort of rating was that as it went down through the historic part of Petersburg, there was buildings that were built that were like 4 bricks thick walls that were just demolished. Not just the roof or the upper levels, but I mean demolished down to within a couple feet of the base. And then there was 2x4s and other types of debris that were shot like missiles that went through some of these walls in other areas, and then it went across the area of Pocahontas Island, where it wiped out all these homes that were in that area, and then ultimately crossing over Interstate 95 and hitting the Walmart and cutting through the Walmart there, where unfortunately some people were killed and a lot of people were injured. So it was a remarkable tornado. This tornado was, I can't remember the entire length of the path, but even the tornado that preceded it, that was out of that other strong thunderstorm cell, that was believed to have been off and on the ground for up to 40 miles. And so again, not only was it such a rare day because of the amount of tornadoes that occurred, but also the strength of the tornadoes and the long paths that these tornadoes were on the ground.
Petersburg, Virginia, known for its economy, had been severely affected. The once standing historical buildings had been ruined. Greg Seidel said it changed everything in an instant for the community.
Petersburg is a very historic town, and the historic area in 1993 was going through a renaissance. It had really started to attract investors, restoring the old buildings, creating a vibrant downtown, and it had changed Petersburg's financial and social outlook. The damage of the storm greatly impacted that progress. Many of those buildings were now unable to be repaired and had to be taken down. Some of them still, to this day, are supported by timbers and are not something that can be occupied. So the knockout blow to the city's tourism and economic future was severe.
Today, Petersburg, Virginia has recovered and is a site of where motion pictures are filmed. The memories of what occurred on August 6, 1993 will never be forgotten. Meteorologist Barbara Watson at the National Weather Service distinctly remembers a storm survivor's story from that day.
One person came up talking to me that whose daughter had been in one of the buildings that was destroyed, and they were. It was like a let's say a 2-3-story building, and they were coming down the steps from the upstairs down. They were either coming down from the 3rd level to the 2nd level, or the 2nd level to the 1st level when the tornado hit the building, and they described seeing the wall disappear, and then their body being picked up by the tornado and being carried. And they saw that they were being hurled toward the wall of the next building. And they thought, this is it. I'm going to be dead. And right before they impacted the wall of the next building collapsed, and they were actually placed on the floor of the next building with just relatively minor injuries. If I remember right, they may have had like a broken leg or something. But considering the fact that they thought this was it, that to me was just an amazing story and description of what they went through.
Virginia State Senator Rosalyn Dance says her role that day in Petersburg wasn't easy, but the support she received from surrounding areas helped everyone cope with the worst disaster Petersburg had ever seen.
All those who came, there were legislators, the governors, and all those, but the most people that had the most significant impact was the diversity of the regular people that just came to say, I saw this, I heard about this, and I just wanted to come and help. They're the ones that stood the test of time. You know, the regulations and all those things that take place at the state and federal level, that the slow drama of that was circumvented by the fact that people came and they made the everyday difference of food, whatever it is, extra shelter, clothing, whatever the people on the island needed, they provided. For the old town area, in a sense, as far as the economic status of the people or the businesses, was much better positioned than the people on Pocahontas Island. And at the end of the day, Pocahontas Island, the area that was concerned that they would be forgotten as we looked at the business community and trying to restore them, that what would be their worth. The worth was that they were men and women and all life matters, and we, the people, the surrounding areas, state, outside the state, we came together to say the media, the local media did fundraisers for us, the TV stations hosted fundraisers to help people. And it was really showing the best side of us. It's sad that we don't see this every day and we go away, but it seems like when we're at our worst and we need help, that's when people come. And that, and all that devastation, that stands out for me, just how considerate, just how much love and support was given to the people of the city of Petersburg.
Next on Tornado Talk, an extremely rare F2 tornado tears through downtown Salt Lake City, Utah on August 11th, 1999. One fatality, more than 100 hurt. Severe weather slams Salt Lake City on episode 16 of Tornado Talk.
This has been Tornado Talk. Take a moment to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for Tornado Talk. Tornado Talk is free to you, but not free to produce. If you love what you hear, please support the show by becoming a member of Team Tornado Talk. It helps keep us going. Your monthly membership starting at $5 a month can earn you cool rewards like a Tornado Talk t-shirt, cap, koozies, and more. Plus, you'll always find free access to our past episodes. Just click the Patreon button online at tornadotalk.com.